So hello Impact Hub Athens. I'm sorry I couldn't be there live at your meeting, but we're here in our lunch break on negotiations on day 10 almost of COP27 in Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt, the first African COP. I'm happy to have the opportunity to give you an update on negotiations. I don't know how much you followed exactly, so I'll make it a little bit round. This is the first African COP, and it is supposed to be the COP of implementation. The implementation of what? The implementation of Glasgow, which was the COP that finally established the playbook, the rules by which we can apply the Paris Agreement, which was signed in COP21 in 2015, and it was the first time after 21 years where we managed to find a mutually agreed system where we can try to address climate change. Now, I know this took a lot of time, but this is really the only way we have found to have mutual cooperation among 193 countries to manage the problem that climate change is a global externality, which means that it's really nobody's business but everybody's business at the same time to deal with it. It's not like the food crisis, it's not like the energy crisis, it's not like the war, which ultimately hits your home, hits your budget, and it's your business to deal with it. It's everybody's business. So this has been a difficult agreement, and the Paris Agreement, being a hybrid multilateral agreement, managed to do that. But it has three legs. It has mitigation, which we all understand what it is. It's about reducing the overshoot of the increase in global warming to 1.5 degrees, which we now recognize as the scientific limit over which social tipping points will hit us before the climate tipping points. It's about adaptation, and COP was all about supposed to be the adaptation COP, and to establish a global goal of adaptation, which means what do we do once we arrive at this 1.5 world, which is completely different from the one we have designed our world, our infrastructure, mostly physical and social infrastructure, and this unfortunately nowhere to be found. Nobody's talking about adaptation here these days, not much, not as much as promised, which is a huge issue for Africa and the global south. And of course there was the third leg, which really showed up first time after 30 years of negotiation, showed up as an article as a point in the Paris Agreement, which was called loss and damage. Loss and damage is what happens beyond adaptation, what happens once you go over the limit of adaptation. Loss and damage is what happened to Pakistan a few months ago, where they are now 33 million people homeless. 33 million people that Pakistan needs to feed, Pakistan needs to house, and then start to reconstructing their livelihoods. Now, Pakistan is emitting less than 1% of global emissions, and the crux of the matter here, what makes loss and damage an issue of climate justice, is that, like Pakistan, which has less than 1% emission, global change will hit first and most those who are least responsible for it, those who are least able to adapt to it, those who are least able to protect themselves, and those that are least able to recover from it. So it's an issue of global climate justice, it's an issue of historical responsibility, it's the so-called common but differentiated responsibilities principle, and since Glasgow we had the admittance of the global north that we do have a liability for this, but we need to measure. This is a very difficult exercise to attribute, and now we have 2 days to go to resolve this political issue. On the mitigation side, there is, because of the war, a myopic and stupid, in my view, idea that we need to backtrack and stop the mitigation effort, while everybody really understands that it is fossil fuels that are fueling the war, that are fueling the energy crisis, and are the cause of our problem. And really, we need to stick to 1.5 degrees as we did in Glasgow, and I think this will be agreed. So now it's really about going to the next COP and stock taking. On the loss and damage, on the political agreement, which needs to be arrived at in the next couple of days, we have two very diverging positions. We have the G77, which is a very big group of developing nations, least developed nations, and China, led by China, which is still understood under the UNFCCC as a non-developed country, even though it is the biggest emitter currently on the planet, not per capita, but in absolute terms, and definitely not historically, but soon will be there among the US. And they are demanding a loss and damage financial facility, a fund. In Europe and the North, there are many, all the countries, they have a big distance from it's not our business, we don't owe them a penny, all the way to it's our problem, it is our liability, it is the dues from our colonial past and exploitation, and we have to make sure that we take care of it. Now, in between, the European Union holds a position that maybe a facility is not a black and white thing. Yes, there could be a facility, but we already have the Santiago network, which is about early warning systems being installed across the globe. We now have the Global Shield, which is an insurance scheme really paid by the North, trying to sort of monetize the business of recovering from extreme weather events, but they're not really buying it. And there is the biggest issue, which is now really on the table after 70 years, and I think this is the big news from COP27. It is the understanding among rich and poor, North and South, that we need to revisit the Bretton Woods Agreement, which is it's the bedrock of the global financial architecture agreed after World War II between Maynard Keynes and the Americans, and it's the system where we decide what is the value of money, most or less. So the idea that we need to actually reform the World Bank, the idea that we need to reform the IMF, the idea that we cannot offer any more loans to the South, the idea that these countries are so burdened fiscally that they don't have the space to, because they're indebted to us in sustainable debts, and they're into IMF programs, in austerity programs. So the idea that they have to pay their interest on loans, which a lot of them start from pre-colonial times, like in Greece, for example, we recently repaid our 1822 revolution loan, let alone the IMF loans. So the idea that they will have to first pay their interest on these loans, as opposed to protecting their people and helping them shelter from what is definitely coming, is completely unsustainable. So now we need to arrive at what is Timmermans called a credible opening to loss and damage, which will allow both the US and China to be on board, and also will satisfy the question of trust and political solidarity that both the Secretary General is asking for and the Global South is demanding, and in my view, rightly so. So we will have news which will not be spectacular from COP, but in my view and in the view of many, we may be at the beginning of establishing a new world which is much more just and much more open for solidarity and innovation. So thank you for listening to me. I wish I could have been there live and answer to any questions I'm sure you're going to have, but maybe on another occasion. Thanks, bye.